So today we'll be joined by Jen Cormier, who is a grief doula who helps us to understand how to navigate grief through grace and or navigating grief with grace. And I think that's a really important thing. During the holiday season, we find that um, there's things that are missing. Holidays are really hard for a lot of people, and what we forget is how to incorporate the people who are missing, the ancestors who have left us, um, and incorporate their wisdom and their traditions into our traditions. Sometimes we'll do that with food, right? We'll bring in grandma's recipes so that we can remember the warmth that we felt when we were kids and we're eating such delicious things. Or we take it by, incorporating ornaments or incorporating um, just different things that we've done that we've grown up with and known to be the way that we want to operate. So all of those things are ways to incorporate things, but then there are other things. There are things that like soldiers experience, people losing their best friends and people losing in situations that feel very much like they were out of their control, because death is almost always out of our control, even though we want to be able to control it. Um, and so when things happen too fast for our nervous system to tap into, we feel trauma, we feel sadness, we feel sometimes depressed, we feel sometimes anxiety. Because we feel like our nervous systems can feel like something is happening that's beyond our control and never was in our control. And we don't know what to do now because we don't know how to operate in the world safely. And that's when anxiety starts to pop in. So it becomes something really challenging to consider. How do you navigate that? One of the things that popped up today, I was on a call with a colleague and she experienced a very traumatic event, work related. And it was so intense. Like the feeling of being threatened felt so intense that it was hard for her to make any movement forward. All she could say is, all I can do is rest right now. All I can do is take a break. And when we dug into why she was taking a break, um, she came up with these words of like, I'm feeling like an imposter. I'm feeling like I'm not worthy. I'm feeling like I don't have any expertise. And I'm feeling like all of these things. And, she obviously had expertise in her field. She'd been doing it for many, many years, won many awards in her profession. But, because something happened that was very negative and shifted her sense of balance or sense of equilibrium and being able to serve her community, she doubted herself to the point of not being able to do anything. And um, that's a nervous system thing. It's a I feel unbalanced in how I'm operating in the world sort of thing. And once we can understand that that's how things show up, then we can make a decision about how to change that, how to shift that, and how to keep moving forward. So, uh, just telling that story as we wait for Jen to come in and talk about grief and grace. Reverend Jen, thanks for showing up.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Adana.
Yes. So I introduced you to our community as so I when we first met many years ago, I feel like you described yourself as a grief doula and even a death doula, helping people understand what it is to experience loss and to work through and move through that space with grace.
Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit more about what that means to you or how you describe yourself now?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've gone through a couple of actually three different doula certifications, a birth doula training, two different death doula trainings that work with conscious dying and green burial and home funeral and teaching people their legal rights. And I feel really passionate about supporting people through these portals of transition. as we move through, like the two biggest ones, right, are birth and death, like when we're coming in and when we're going out. And then I also focused on, soulful, unique wedding ceremony for a while. That was my main focus, helping blended families come together in a really unique way and honoring that in a really, special ritual. Then we have, coming of age ceremonies and elder ceremonies and all of these different thresholds, which, in our sort of general culture, I think we miss a lot of opportunities to honor these threshold moments when we not only can be celebrating, but also grieving, because every time we hit a crossroad in life, there's a letting go and then there's something new. So there are many different, spiritual traditions, indigenous cultures, places where there are honorings of, coming of age ceremonies, elder ceremonies, different things where, if we don't have that if we don't maybe have that in a spiritual community, a religious community, a familial community, we can kind of feel a little bit adrift. We could think of, okay, we've got, when people turn 21, they drink. When they're 18, there's a high school graduation or college graduation, or, sort of those moments where we're celebrating, hey, I finished this big thing. But then often we feel like, now what? And now what do I do? And I'm supposed to be really happy because I'm a college graduate, but now I have to go be a real adult. And what does that mean? And how do I function? So there are a lot of these happy threshold moments that we then feel like, I don't know who I am. There's like an identity like shift. For motherhood, for example, there's a lot of, postpartum depression where it's like, you should be happy, you're a mother. And then it's like, I don't know, we're not necessarily getting all the support that we need to successfully make that bridge into that new thing. So I was not expecting to say all that, but all of that just came out of my out of my mouth. So I would just say, you just asked me how I would define myself now. I help people through life transition moments. And that is a weaving of some grief work and also celebration and also purpose, and also ways to, find meaningful ritual and daily habits to really fully embrace these new ways of being. So that's a lot of the work that I do with my clients now.
I love that. You said all of that, but I think all of that needed to be said because you brought up like 5 different types of life transitions that we don't typically have a lot of ritual around, right? We talk about birth, you talk about, what happens to the mom after the birth, you talk about, dying, you talk about the transition. I think about, for soldiers, these people in my community, the idea of taking down or putting down that identity of a soldier and moving into the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
Pretty similar to that college graduate, like, what do I do now? Like, I was doing all
Yeah.
this other stuff. I built a whole thing. I accomplished so much. And yet and still, like, now I'm going to the world having done that thing, but the world doesn't necessarily know what to do with that. I have to know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there, that transition may have, trauma woven in. It might not be traumatic, but it is just disorienting
Mhm.
because we're working with an identity shift. And I've worked with folks who maybe they've come to me because their parent died, but then they're also moving through retirement, for example. And
Mhm.
that is very disorienting because it was like, I was this my whole life, kind of like what you're saying with folks in uniform. I was soldier, I was Marine, I was whatever. And now who am I? Like now I have to be something else. I'm not really in that skin yet. So how do we hold ourselves? How do we have communities of support, rituals of support to make that transition in a successful way?
Yeah. Mm. That's really it's really something to consider because I don't know that we have a lot of tradition other than like, you have a retirement ceremony and then what, right?
It's like a party, like, woohoo, you retired,
That
have
was 30 years of my life, 20
have
years of
this
my life, whatever it is, right?
basket, right? After decades. And now, and some people, have an easier time than others. Like we're all different, in
Mhm.
every way that we grieve is different, every loss is different. So, just giving anyone who's listening permission, no matter what you're going through, if you're going through the grief of someone in your life who died, or you lost a job or a home or an identity or whatever that is, your process of letting that go is going to look different with every transition.